Western classical music and Chinese musical heritage blend in perfect harmony. For American composer Niccolo Athens, this is the most natural way to create, combining his love of music with a deep interest in China. The 34-year-old Athens now teaches composition at the Tianjin Juilliard School, the branch campus of the Juilliard School in New York, and has been pushing the limits of Western classical music, mixing the rich sonorities and compelling melodies of Chinese music. Among his many compositions, Free Settings from the Book of Odes is probably one of the most challenging. Mixing the guzheng or the Chinese plug zither with the chamber music setting, the piece is inspired by Shi Jing with a history of 2,500 years. It's believed to be the oldest existing example of Chinese poetry.
I think the interesting thing about it for me is this sort of combination of some aspects of it being still very familiar and other parts of it being very foreign. I get a similar sense sometimes reading things like Homer or the sort of foundational things from Western literature. Some aspects of it are very recognizably human, and other things in it just seem so sort of alien in a sort of enchanting and interesting way.
In ancient China, poems, music, and dance, they were believed to be interconnected. So in a way, I think the poems from Shi Jing were written to be chanted aloud.
Sure. Even later song poetry is all based on, different song meters. But yeah, for sure they were sung, so it makes a very natural setting to music.
In fact, among the many classical repertoires from the West, there exist quite a few which bear strong Chinese influences. The most notable ones include Puccini's Turandot and composer John Cage's take on I Ching, the Book of Changes, an ancient Chinese divination text. Athens says although the two composers approached the subject differently, the kind of cultural resonance shown in their music is palpable.
The first is Puccini using sort of a version of the famous Jasmine Flower melody in his opera to represent as a sort of leitmotif the character of the princess Turandot. It's actually very beautifully done. He never went to China. I'm sure I think he had a music box or something that had the tune in it. But he harmonizes it in a very beautiful way, actually. And I often use that as an example for how you can add sort of more colorful harmonies to a pentatonic melody. In the case of Cage, it's more the philosophical aspect of it that interested him. His use of the I Ching was a way to get random notes.
Athens' musical journey to China begins in San Antonio, Texas, where he was born and raised. There he showed talent in music at an early age and went on to study at the prestigious Juilliard School in New York. In his 4th year, he began taking Chinese lessons out of interest. This led to his plans to further his studies in China. And like most foreigners, he's deeply impressed by director An Li's Oscar-winning movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and the mystical Middle Kingdom it portrayed.
Definitely the bamboo forests were part of it. Although it's funny you mentioned Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because I saw that movie as a child and I remember it quite vividly. And the thing I remember about it is the parts that are shot in Xinjiang or Gansu or somewhere in the West. And there's big desert expanses, and I think that's actually quite different than what most people in the West imagine China looking like. So maybe that movie actually sort of expanded my idea of what is encompassed by China.
When he's not composing, Athens likes to travel around China, not necessarily seeking musical inspiration, but to immerse himself in the vastness of the country's landscapes and cultures. Those experiences reflect themselves in his music, where centuries-old folk tunes get a modern twist. Sometimes you can almost feel a hint of jazz. In Folk Song Serenade, the commissioned piece for the Tianjin Juilliard Ensemble, he chose 3 lesser-known but melodious folk songs from eastern China's Zhejiang province and arranged them for chamber music.
but I wanted to find some songs that were not so well known. So I subsequently discovered that each province, there's a big fat sea green book, and they're really useful actually, because they're full of songs that are not well known, but if you spend your time going through those books, you can find some really beautiful melodies from all over the country. So anyway, I had the Zhejiang book, and that's where I found the 3 melodies that are used in that piece.
The exotic melodies, as well as the diverse array of musical instruments from China, fascinate Athens. And when asked about his favorite Chinese musical instrument, he comes up with the most unexpected one.
I really like the suona, just as an instrument on its own. I've never had a chance to write for it. I'm not sure how I would go about trying to incorporate it into my own work, because it's got a very, unique, strong flavor to it. But I very much like the instrument, so if someone, asked me to try and write something for it, I think I would give it a try. It's very rambunctious and kind of fun.
Well, because Chinese people use these instruments both for happier occasions
and for funerals,
yeah.
Right. And technically, it's actually really interesting, all the things it can do. Very agile.
Yeah, but it also has a very...
It's loud.
Yeah, it's loud.
It's loud. It makes a very good solo instrument. I mean, I've heard pieces written, for suona and orchestra, which work quite well.
Now with Chinese literary classic and reimagined folk songs under his belt, Athens is eager to delve deeper into China's rich cultural heritage. He's now looking into the 300 Tang poems, which is often considered the pinnacle of Chinese poetry.
I might be writing some new settings of Tang poetry. I've been trying to put together, instead of a standalone, I would like to write a cycle of songs around the theme of homesickness. Because when I was reading through the 300 Tang poems, that's one of the themes that recurs. And especially not being able to go home very much lately, that sort of resonated with me, and I was sort of collecting the poems on that sort of surround that theme, and thinking about what order to put them in, and studying them, and making different translations into English and copying them out and things.
Athens also hopes to share his knowledge with the budding talents at Tianjin Juilliard and help them find their voices on a bigger stage.
Having had quite a bit of experience in China, the thing that actually is most valuable is just that allows me to connect with the students here, maybe on a human level. For example, if they tell me where they're from, maybe I've been there and we can talk about it. I hope they can cultivate the self-motivated love of their art that will propel them, in the future as they move forward through their lives. I think that the question for the younger composers is, what now? I mean, in a way, what I'm doing is still, very much in that traditional model. For example, the overture we just discussed. But I think for young composers in China, actually, there's a challenge to carve out their own space in this cultural dialogue. Now that these, really accomplished composers of the older generation have already written so many works that do this kind of thing very well. I think it's a tough creative journey.
Through his music and creativity, Athens hoped to build bridges of understanding and strike a perfect chord between East and West. Shen Li, CGTN.